Welcome to the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall, Customer Success Leader.
And me, Deborah Knight, founder of CS consultancy Captive.
Each episode we interview people that have set up customer success from the ground up at their companies.
And we try and have a lot of fun in the process.
We hope you enjoy the next episode. Hello guys. Hi Deb. Hi Tash. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Awesome. Very excited for this week's episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast. It's not baking sun anymore in England, which is nice. So my AC isn't cranked up like it normally is.
If anybody is listening to this podcast from other parts of the world, they'll just think, why are they always talking about the weather? And I'm sorry, it's just a necessary thing if you're British.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage. But hang on, what, Mike? You have AC. You must be one of like less than 1% of the British population that has it.
I would say so. I basically got this little custom office built outside when we did our extension. I was like, I've got to have AC. Oh, I can't work in summer. I can't work in winter. I can work for about 2 months in spring. So I'm like, I had to have it. So yeah, I'm lucky to have it. But just to quickly introduce our awesome guest today. Very lucky to have Tash on. Tash Evans is the VP of Customer Growth at Hook. I'll let her introduce herself, a bit of a background in a moment. Just quickly, the last time I saw Tash, it was not so long ago. I want to say I was wearing a black tie. Tash definitely was, because Hook leads and owns the Customer Growth Awards, and I was kindly invited by Tash. And excellent event. If you haven't been, I recommend going. It was great, a really enjoyable night, and very customer success centric, and so a little push on that. I thought that was great. So thanks for the invite, Tash.
Yeah, thank you. I was worried what you were going to say there when you said I last saw Tash, and I was like, oh no, what was I doing at the event?
No, it was great, and so yeah, really good to have you today on, Tash. Tash has joined us on our community online panels and workshops before, and run an excellent session. So we thought it'd be really relevant for our audience today. So I'm just going to let Tash introduce herself a bit more, if that's all right. Tash, I'd love to hear more about you and your background.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks so much for having me. I love stuff like this, and it's so nice to be able to chat CS, give back to the community. So yeah, thrilled to be here. Thank you. So yeah, as Mike said, I'm Tash. I lead customer growth at Hook, which here is everything post-sales. So customer success, although we call it account management right now because we run quite a commercial CS motion here at Hook. The support, the technical implementation, data science, and I also lead marketing, which is kind of a story for another day, but most of our customers are VPs of CS leaders like myself, or account management leaders, and so there's a really nice harmony between me supporting the customers, but also being a part of that message that we go to market with around how we're going to support our customers. And also just like a really nice harmony between the value that you like build post sales and then how you turn that back into like the marketing engine. Maybe more companies should do that. I don't know. We're going to see. But I've been in customer success for 12-ish years now. Always been running more of that kind of like revenue-led CS motion. Love owning a number. And I've worked in companies of all sorts of different sizes. So Hook is a small and fast-growing company, but I've also worked at SalesLoft and LinkedIn and run some bigger teams and orgs too. And so nice right now to be able to take some of that experience from running like more mature CS orgs, but build it into what is a smaller organization? What does customer success need here? And so kind of excited to dig into some of that today.
Awesome. Yeah, very, very relevant. I think, you as you say, Tash, obviously customer success from the ground up is about helping early startups, early stage CS people, CS leaders sort of navigate how to do this, effectively set up retention businesses at their organisation. So with your experience at Hook, I think that's very relevant. And Hook's a great solution, by the way. Like lots of people in our community talk very highly of it. And could you just quickly touch on what Hook is and the solution, just briefly, just to give people a bit more context?
Yeah, should have included that in my intro. Thanks for the nudge, Mike. What does Hook do? We're AI-based technology for customer success, account management leaders. Our goal is to elevate your CS team. So freeing them up with more time to do the things that you want them to do, giving them the insights that they need to go and operate and run their role effectively, And the end goal here is increase your efficiency, improve your GRR, increase your upsells. So it's about how do we fuel that revenue-led CS motion, and how do we use technology, how do we use AI to help CSMs go do that in the best possible way.
Nice, awesome. So yeah, obviously the topic today is very based around those areas. So
Yeah.
So the topic today is fairly around AI, automation, customer success. So sort of agents, automation, and customer success, if you look at it that way. So I think we were saying just in our little chat before the session today about, we feel me and Deb feel we're going to get educated today, because I think there is some nuance about how people understand what these things are and how they work, and how, importantly for this audience, like how to help them in customer success. So great topic today. But as always, before we jump into that, we always have a that escalated fast section where we look into the Reddit world. There's a great customer success forum on there called Customer Success, strangely enough, and there's usually some interesting and sometimes bizarre points on there. So we're gonna throw one at you today, Tash, and me and Deb will have some thoughts on it. Obviously, try to keep it relevant to the topic. So always a funny handle on these. This is from Worried Variety 3397.
I think Mike just picks them based on the name rather than the theme.
Yeah.
We're like naming and shaming people's Reddit things here. I love it.
If it was just a code, like as Deb say, I probably would ignore it. But they're
What
always...
if it's me? What if it's me that's done the post under a different name, Mike?
That would be an interesting scenario. I would love that. That would be hilarious if I just randomly found that. But as I say, it's kind of relevant. So, is anyone else's AI chatbot struggling just because of messy documents? Interesting. So I keep seeing teams build AI customer service bots by just uploading every old PDF, Word doc or spreadsheet they can find. Old policies, duplicate files, messy exports, outdated versions. Then when something changes, the new file gets added, but the old file stays there too. So it's probably an easy mistake to make with chatbots. No surprise the bots start giving weird answers and not being very helpful. He said, this person says, I ran this while working on a customer service system for a clinic chain. So the results some can be good, but it can be quite problematic, I think, is the point. And they're saying, I'm trying to sanity check whether this is a real problem for other teams too. So, interesting one. I think that sort of getting the data it's feeding from it right, I guess, is important. But Tash, any thoughts on that scenario? Pitfalls of these sort of AI automation systems, agents, and picking the bad information?
Yeah, I think this is just one of those, like, you're going to get out what you put in. I see like two places that teams go wrong with agents. This is one, like feeding it bad data or feeding it bad content, or just not feeding it enough at all. The good side and the bad side of AI, right, is it can go find patterns, but you've got to give it the right data to find the patterns in and to create that context and create the insight. And so, like, yeah, you're giving it all documentation, it's going to think that that's real and it's going to provide bad advice. But at the same time, if you're not giving it enough context, it's going to go operate on a world of its own and come up with its own weird and wonderful things that it thinks you should be doing. So, I think they're spot on to call it out. You've got to get your documentation right, you've got to get your data right for this stuff to work properly.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, Deb, any thoughts on that? Any experience of that sort of this going well or this going badly with their AI and agents?
Yeah, I mean, we had a scenario recently where we were using Notion AI, where lots of policies and documentations are stored, and it returned a result for a policy which we couldn't actually find. So we were like, where is this policy it's reading? And so, yeah, I think that's certainly one of the risks. And I think that, before AI, we had document control version 1 to version 500 or whatever. And I think that it's just another sort of housekeeping thing, really, of making sure you've got that version control. And also, I think, knowing how to ask those prompts and how to ask and how to be specific as well about what you're looking for is really important. Like saying things like, from the most recent version, can you tell me the answer? And I think that I've certainly been caught out by that, where I've just assumed it's going to give me the most recent version of that documentation, and then it hasn't. But equally, where we're not keeping that documentation updated as it changes, or if it's incorrect, and then not going back and correcting that. So yeah, I think it's just a very traditional version control discipline, which is now let loose with AI.
Yeah, I think probably also agree, and I think also having, I suppose, like an agent that your internal team uses to get information from internal systems. At least they'd if something seems a bit off, they might be like, okay, this mostly makes sense, and this bit I might have to check. But I guess I don't know what you think. I'm sure you're getting into this today, Tash. But sort of, if it's an agent for customers, you kind of the control of the information and the versions, I guess, is probably more important, right? Because you don't want them going, oh, it can do this thing, and actually it can't, or
totally. Yeah,
right,
and we're advocating quite heavily for like what we would call like human in the loop as the first phase, like not just letting your agent go wild and message customers on your behalf without like really taking it through some like proper testing where you see the outputs that it's generating and you can check for like the things that the Reddit post or Deb has mentioned before you go out, so you know that the way that you've built your prompt, the instructions you've given it, the guidelines you've given it are creating valuable outputs that add to the customer experience and drive value rather than eroding trust or sending them false information. I think, Deb, you used a really good word there that sums it up right. And it's like, don't assume that AI is thinking the same way that you are. You have to be so explicit with the instructions you're giving it, the limits you're giving it, in order to get that like best possible output.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Interesting one, very relevant, as I said. Thanks for your thoughts. So, yeah, I think we'll jump into it, into the interview portion. So, Tash, I think you've been briefed on that there will be an icebreaker. There usually is, and we've caught people out on this a little bit before, so we wanted to sort of prep you on that one. And so it's not anything you have to be like, oh, I don't want to say this thing. So hopefully it's an easy one, and then I'm sure Deb will jump into the interview portion, and we'll find out all the information on this important topic. So, Deb, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, well, maintaining the theme of the weather, I think that last week it was super hot and here in the UK, and I know that the summer is only just beginning and there's more heat to come, hopefully. I'm a bit of a heat worshipper, so I'm cool with it. But what I'd love to learn is how are you keeping yourself cool last week? Were you stealing the kids' paddling pool, or did you have other handy tips that you can share with us for the next wave that comes?
So yes, always stealing the kids' paddling pool and their slip and slide and all of that good stuff. But what I got really into is eating as much like frozen based food as possible. So we made a ton of ice cream last week. I got into an Instagram reel hole of like freezing fruit and grating it and it becomes ice cream. Or like today for my lunch, I had a burrata and I grated frozen tomato on top with a little bit of olive oil. So like creating as many frozen meals as I possibly can to keep me and the kids cool.
Try frozen grapes. That was a tip I've had before.
No.
And actually, in particular, a tip that I had. So frozen grapes, don't keep them in the freezer. I found if you keep them in the freezer, they go a bit too hard. So you just put them in for an hour or two, and they're really nice. But also, someone told me instead of putting ice in your wine, put frozen grapes in your wine, and it's a nice way of keeping it cool without watering it down. So there you go. There's another one for you to try.
Yes, I'll add that in. Thank you.
I think my wife might have gone down the same rabbit hole as you, Tash, because I looked in the freezer at the weekend. There was loads of slices of watermelon like frozen in there, and she was doing the same thing. So I think she went down the same Instagram rabbit hole. That's exciting content for a hot day.
Yeah, I love it.
Cool. All right, let's crack on.
Yeah. We will crack on with the topic of agent versus automation versus CSM, and I suppose a good starting point to get us all on the same page is perhaps sort of what do you actually mean by agent, and how does that look for you at Hook?
Yeah, I think it's such a topical question. You guys mentioned at the start of this that it's nuanced, right? Everyone's got a different opinion on what this does, and so I can give you like my opinion and Hook's opinion, but that might not be Anthropic's opinion or anybody else's opinion on what they think an agent is. But to me, in the way that we think about this at Hook, is an agent has to own an end-to-end outcome. So rather than just saying, oh, an agent for me writes me a prep for a piece of meeting, like that's a task. And sure, you can use LLMs and you can use like agentic flows for that. But for us, an agent has to actually like replace a piece of work that a CSM would otherwise be doing. And so like a really good example of that is we try really hard to give all of our agents outcomes or goals that they have to hit. So for instance, if you want to run your customer onboarding, you say to the agent, hey, here's what great looks like for this customer at 30 or 60 or 90 days. Your job is to get as many customers as possible to that particular outcome. And that's then where the agent's like looking at how the customer's using your platform right now and nudging them towards those goals that you've given it. So that for us is what an agent is.
Okay, great. That's really a nice definition of it. I really like that that sort of definition of owning the end-to-end process. So where does automation differ?
Yeah, so the word automation is used like relatively loosely, but I think most people when they say automation, they're thinking about a linear step-by-step digital journey, and that's absolutely an example of an automation. But an automation is more than that. It's like if this happens, then do this task. And that can look like sending a customer down an automated journey, but it can also look like if this happens, then trigger sending this to a CSM wherever they operate. Like if you hear a risk or if you hear an upsell opportunity, then automate getting that in front of the CSM as quickly as possible. It can automate pushing data from one place to another, whereas typically an agent doesn't always do some of that. So we think of automations a bit more broadly, but oftentimes a lot of CS leaders, when they're saying automations, they're thinking of it as what's this like linear step-by-step automated flow that I want my customer to go down.
And I guess, right, an agent can kick off an automation, couldn't it? Right?
Exactly, yeah. So one of the, or an automation can kick off an agent. So we think about it here like, okay, well, if you think about that example that I used with onboarding, if the agent is reviewing how the customers are using your piece of tech and at 30 days they haven't hit that goal, then that's the trigger. Hey, this automation has seen that they're not at that goal, trigger the agent to go get them back there. So they kind of work hand in hand. Is it worth me adding a little bit of colour on what I think each one does well?
Yeah, definitely.
So I would think about, because, and the reason, by the way, I think this is really important is we're all getting so excited by AI and agents, and like quite rightly, but there's a cost associated, right, with getting these agents to go do things. And so I'm really advocating a lot within our customer base, but just more broadly for like, hey, automations still have a really cool place and like they've got a really great job to go do. And for me, that's where you've got a really simple couple of step journeys that you don't want to deviate from and you're really happy for your customers to follow. That's a great use case for an automation. Or where you want to be really controlled with the message and with the content. That's a great use case for an automation. Where the agent comes into its own is where you want it to look across lots of different patterns and you want the steps or the flow to be really dependent on a number of different factors. Because we can build that out with automations, right? We can say, well, if this happens, then send them down that journey. But if the other thing happens, then send them down here. But after you've done 2 or 3 if then that's, you're creating the world's most complex automation that someone's got to maintain all the content for and check that customers aren't getting stuck in there. That's where an agent like really excels because it can see all the different patterns and it can choose all the different paths. You don't need to define them. But the other thing that the agent's really good at is creating bespoke content then to that scenario. So rather than you having to create all of the content for each of the different scenarios, the agent can do that if you've given it enough like really good data and really good context to go do that. And so if I give an example for onboarding, when we bring customers on at Hook, we've got an automation for the first 30 days. So as they're going through their technical implementation, I really want to control the content that they're getting and when, to get them thinking about certain things that then my team are working with them on. After those 30 days, when they're live on the platform, then I set the agent off and running, because they're in the platform now. We can read how they're using it and we can start to nudge them in the right direction. I don't want an automation to do that, because there'll be loads of different ways that customers are using the platform, loads of different scenarios where they're doing one thing but not another. And so that's where the agent comes into its own.
Nice.
So when you said that's when I set the agent off, up and running, like, how do you do that? Like, how do you instruct the agent get going now? Are you using a specific system? Is it something you've incorporated into the product? What does that look like for you?
So for us, it's in the product, and again, it's a trigger. The way that I think about this is there's like two main trigger events that tee up your automations or tee up your agents. You've got customer journey based triggers. So think about that as like timeline, where they are in their 12 months or their 24 months, or even sometimes like how mature they are as a customer, how many renewal cycles they've been through. But that's like customer journey. If they hit this milestone, then do this, whether that's an automation or an agent. And then the other category is like behavior or signal based. So if they are at risk, do this, or if they are healthy or a maintain account, do this, or if they're an upsell, do that. Or you can get really specific and say, if this particular product usage metric drops below here, then do this. And so when we're speaking to customers and when we think about like how we build our automations and our agents internally, we're thinking about the like customer journey and then the behavior. You'll find that it's easier to pick one or the other in the early days. So when we were starting out at Hook and we were still learning about what did customer behavior look like, the easiest place to start was in the customer journey. So the milestone based stuff. And then you can start to think about, okay, well, how might I want to layer on some automations or some agents that are more behavior based? Now we understand a bit more about my customer base. Our most then mature customers are like linking both together. So they might have, hey, if you're in onboarding and you're behaving this way, then go down this route. Or if you're a more mature customer and you're behaving this way, then I want this agent to run this way or this one to run that way.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because it's definitely a step on from, let's say, Tech Touch, right? So there might be a Tech Touch campaign program that you use, right, where like I've just renewed, and that triggers your CRM to send them automated email with some dynamic field saying, your usage was this, now it's this, you just this, etc. Right? That's kind of fairly been going on around for quite some time. But for the agent to understand how you describe it it's smarter, right? So it's like looking at context, other data sort of areas, other systems, product utilization, adoption, contracts, and then kind of pulling in more bespoke direction, right? It's like
exactly.
Right?
Exactly, yeah. And you can have them running against different scenarios. So you might have one agent whose job is to complete the onboarding. You might have another agent whose job is to say, hey, I want every customer post onboarding to be at this level of adoption, constantly analyze the whole customer base. And when they drop below that level, nudge them back up. That's your job. And another agent whose job maybe is to process renewals as efficiently as they can, or again, this is where we think about it in terms of like outcomes. What's the thing that you want that agent to drive for you as a business, and then building it around that.
And is that all still within the product throughout that whole life cycle? So a renewal, is that sort of prompting action within the product, or are you managing any of that renewal process elsewhere?
So for us, that's in the product. We run, like, again, in CS, drink your own champagne wherever you can. We run most of that out of the product. But obviously there's then other scenarios. We have customers who are then building their own agents in Claude for things that sit alongside CS. Like maybe you want to use all of the great data that CS like gathers and finds on a customer to then build a really great support agent that sits in Claude, or an agent whose job it is to synthesize product feedback and deliver that to your product team to say, hey, this is what customers are saying about the product, and this is how much ARR is associated to different product requests. Like there's so many different use cases for it, and I think where you choose to build your agent depends on your like internal infrastructure and the data that you and different teams have access to.
You touched earlier on sort of almost where to start, being that kind of key milestones and customer journey. But internally, where are you starting this? Like how are you involving the CS team or your product team, and what does that look like? Because it's basically a business strategy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So I think about this in terms of, don't think about automations and agents to begin with. Think about what is it that my customers need to be successful? What are the outcomes that I'm trying to drive? And then what do I think are the like activities or the jobs to be done that link to that? So you're almost thinking about it, you know how we used to do loads of like customer journey exercises as a CS team. It's like almost thinking about it like that, but less thinking about what does this customer need at day 90 or day 120, and just thinking about what are the outcomes I need to drive? What do my customers need from a team or a solution to be really successful in the product? And then what do we think we need to do to drive that success? And you create almost like a jobs to be done list. Some will be internal, some will be customer facing. And then from there, I'm thinking about, okay, what can I automate? What could I give to an agent versus what's always going to be a CSM's responsibility? So for example, I'm always going to want a CSM in my world to do really great customer discovery and to build out a success plan, because that's the core crux of the motion that we want to run, is understanding what does success mean to a customer and how are we going to get you there. Whereas there might be some other responsibilities like alerting people of dips in product usage and the benefits of using that I feel comfortable giving to an agent or to an automation. So it's thinking, what do you want to be done? How does that translate into your like jobs to be done list? And then what do you feel comfortable automating and giving to an agent? What needs to go to a CSM? And then where you've got the like what can be given to an automation and agent, then you have to think about, what do I want to give to the automation and the agent? Like it's not just it's not what could you do, it's like a choice for me as a business on like what do I feel comfortable doing. And some of that might be based on the tech that you have access to, the data you have access to. Like sure, we could give loads of things to an agent, but is it generating you a really good output, and is that a value add for your customer base? But then it's also thinking about how your customer base operates. How much hands-on support do they tend to need? What's their style of how they want to work with your business? How self-serve is your product versus like how much explanation does it really need? How much great documentation do you have or not have on how the customer can go and self-serve? And so I think there's like a set of questions to kind of ask yourself to start to build that picture of, out of all of these jobs to be done, okay, cool, what definitely sits in the CS camp, what definitely sits in the agent camp, and then how do we, for some of this middle piece, start to figure out where it makes more sense to go to an automation and agent or to a CSM. But you're right, Deb, it's like you're thinking about it like a business strategy and almost like just how you want to run your CS motion.
It also feels a bit like doing something new is much easier than changing something that already exists. I don't know if you found that when you were implementing this, whether you found that actually there's a touch point we're missing out here that's really vital. Can we use an agent to test doing something there versus sort of unravelling some automations that maybe already exist and might be suitable for an agent, but it's going to take a lot more work to unravel. I don't know if you've found that at all.
I think that's a fair comment. I think like creating net new activities is way easier. Then you've got translating things that already exist in an automation into another automation or an agent. But then you've also got this piece around translating maybe what you're running as a hands-on CSM activity right now into an automation and agent, and not just how you build that, but how you manage that with your CSMs so that they buy into why you're automating that. So they buy into how they should use their new free time wisely, or how you expect them to go use that new free time. But then it's also getting buy-in from the customer, right? Like maybe the customer's used to this like really, really hands-on CS service, and now you're telling them, hey, you're going to get this level of automation from me. And the way that we handle that, obviously it's an easier position for us, right? Because this is how we're spending time with our customers. But at SalesLoft, when we built the new like digital motion, and when we had to explain to customers like, hey, you're going to get this now, we would just be really upfront about it and say, hey, you're at the start of the relationship, you're going to get a series of automated emails from me. They're intelligent and they're designed to add value and get you information, insight, and action quickly that I think will be really beneficial to your business. The reason that we do that is to free me up with time to do X, Y, and Z with you. So it's like a positioning exercise, and it's the same with your CSMs internally. Hey, we're going to automate this piece of the role that you do right now. We're going to give that to an agent. But the reason that we're doing that is to free you up with time to do X, Y, and Z. That's going to help you hit your target, Mr. and Mrs. CSM. So I think it's like a positioning piece.
A good question on that, because I'm glad you touched that last point about like how the messages go out, because I know as a CSM, I want some control over I want my customers to get messages from me, and even if those messages were generated by some like an agent, I'd kind of want it to come from me. And I know it sounds like for the SalesLoft example, you kind of cued your customers to be like, you're going to get automated emails, they're relevant emails, this is the reason you're getting them. But like, could you have an agent, I think you probably can, where it would queue up via like a Gmail extension the information that you could then send out, your CSM could then send out. So it's almost like we've created you an email to respond to this customer with this trigger, but it's coming from you rather than it coming from like, agent at salesloft.com. Like,
Agent Tash.
Agent Tash. And then you know it's generated because it's not from their email, but if it's coming from the person you work with, yes, and then maybe they can check it a little bit, or change that word and then I can send. So like, I'm wondering if that's a thing people would do more than CSMs do, like so. Personalised.
Yeah, we do that at Hook, so we queue all the actions up in the platform, and then it's your choice as a business or as a CSM whether you want them to just automatically go out, whether you want to review them and send them, or whether you want to just take the content and incorporate it into something else. And I absolutely think like wherever you're building your agentic capability, you should be doing that. And I think there's like different strategies that you might want to apply to different segments of your business, right? Like you referenced Tech Touch earlier, Mike. If you're running a scaled CS motion or a digital CS motion, you probably don't want to queue up all those actions for your CSMs to review, because they might then end up reviewing 50,000 actions. And so you want to be really, you want to feel comfortable in what's getting delivered, but then you want to ultimately automate that. Whereas if you're operating in the enterprise space, like, sure, I'm happy for the agent to do the hard graft for me, right? Like, it's done the analysis, it's figured out something that needs to happen, and it's written me the content. But I might want to review that first. And to your point, Mike, I might want to tweak the wording, or I might want to be like, hey, I'm meeting that customer tomorrow. So rather than sending this email, I'm just going to bring this point up on that conversation. So I totally think that we should be building the kinds of flows that are adaptive to the CS motion and what works for the CSM.
Definitely.
Do you see a difference culturally across different markets about how your customers accept some of that kind of dialogue and that positioning of the fact that we're gonna be working and interacting with you maybe differently to how you might traditionally expect?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance there. If you're operating in the SaaS space, then folks are way more open to that. We understand how things are moving towards AI and automations, and actually I find that a lot of our customers who have customers in the SaaS space, their customers are crying out for this. They want to just have the information at the right time on demand. They don't want to wait to speak to a human. They just want to get that served to them. Whereas if you've got customers in the finance and the banking space, that might look and feel a little bit differently, because historically they're used to a certain level of service. I find that a lot of that is reflective based on the customers that they are serving. So if you're operating with a customer in finance and they are held to a really high level of standard of service by their customers, then usually they expect the same of you as a CSM. Whereas again, in the SaaS and the software space, it looks and feels a little bit differently. And so I think there's an interesting piece here to analyze your customer base and what's expected of them, because oftentimes that gets reflected right back to you as a CSM.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think like I've seen, because I work in the corporate space more like that. Because they're bigger organisations, corporates, larger scale corporates, they're sort of. I think there are. Because there's more regulation, because there's a wider customer base, bigger customers as well as smaller ones. Like, feel like they're less able to be dynamic with this provision of agentic like messaging to customers. I think like a Hook or a smaller organisation could probably work a bit faster and be like, well, let's make a decision on this. I think it's a real benefit. I feel like the smaller the organisation, almost like the bigger they can leverage this stuff, because there's, like I said, there's less approval processes to get this put in. There's less. It's a smaller system, the smaller teams, right? So I feel like for the people listening to this, like there's the world's your oyster in terms of being able to like multiply and scale your capabilities, right?
Totally, and I think one of the things I love about being in a smaller organisation is your ability to iterate. Like the pace of change that you can have in a smaller organisation is so good compared to a larger one. And so I think more than ever in smaller companies, you've got that ability to like run little tests, see what works, and then iterate on it and try something different and then improve on it next. And so I think the biggest thing that we see within our customer base with automations and agents is there's so much that could be done. People are striving for like perfection from day one. How do I build out every possible automation and agent to run my entire digital journey for me? And the thing is, like, you don't have to hit perfection straight away. It's absolutely okay to think of a couple of automations or get one agent up and running on one part of your customer base and test and see how that works and learn from it before you roll it out elsewhere. So I think if there's one message, if you're thinking about this, it's like, give some of this stuff a go, test it on a little pool, see how it is, and run it from there.
Yeah, I definitely think you've just got to dive in. If you haven't yet, you've got to just try something. It's that first step, isn't it? Talking about trying things and them maybe working or not working, can you share a sort of a whoops moment with us where you maybe went, oh, that didn't actually work how I wanted it to, or let's pretend we never did that? One of those kinds of moments.
Yeah, I don't think it's like really specific, but I know when I joined Hook, I was really focused straight away on how do I automate to scale? How do we automate our implementation and onboarding that we run in order to help us grow quickly? What I hadn't done first is really understand what does a great implementation and onboarding look like for a customer, and how do we like perfect what great looks like before we look to automate any part of that. And then I think the so what, like the what happened was we were automating a process that like didn't actually work and wasn't really delivering a ton of value. And so this is why I come back to this like learning of just start with like, what does great look like? What does my customer need to be really successful? What do we have to do to be really successful? And then once you've got that list, then start to think about, from that list of jobs to be done, what can I go and automate, rather than starting with the automation in mind and accidentally messing it up like I did.
I mean, it's been a real eye-opener of things to think about, and actually a lot of it's quite simple. Sometimes it's the terminology that scares us away from these things, but we're bringing back a lot of our core CS skills when we're thinking about this.
I agree.
I wanted to just finish with something that you started the conversation with, which was human in the loop. I think keep the human in the loop.
Yeah.
Was something that you said that you have as a philosophy. How do you know which human, and how are you making that happen and still having that accountability around that?
How do you know which human? Do you mean like as in the right roles and responsibilities to apply?
Yeah. I mean, do you
That's
just
such
have
a good
like
question.
one person, or is it different according to different parts of the life cycle? Like, who is that human?
Yeah, so for us, it's always the CSM or the AM. I've made a really conscious choice here that our CSM runs full life cycle, so everything from onboarding through to renewal negotiation. Because that works for us at our business size. I think when you're small, there's a lot of benefit to having someone do everything. Because just what they're exposed to and the amount of like conversations they can have is next level. So for us, it's the same human. I think the kind of benefit of this, thinking about the automations you can run, the agents you can apply, and then I think about it as like layers. So you've got like automations, what can I do there? Then how do I layer on what my agents do? And then the highest value is the CSM or the AM. What are the jobs left for them to do, and how do they go execute? I think one of the benefits of this approach is once you see all of the jobs that are left, you really get a sense of what is that job for you now as a business? Because I think that CSM role is evolving, right? Like if we're giving a lot of this stuff to automations and to agents, then, you know, in this new world, what does that CSM role look like? I think that's one of the benefits of this approach, because it allows you to then look at, oh, hang on, like in my new world, a CSM looks and feels like this. And so how do I make sure I'm applying the right skills and the right will and the right incentive to get them to go do that job? So I think it allows us to think about our talent a little bit differently.
And I guess you could also take it a step further, and you could train the agent on the voice of the CSM that it's providing information to. That's quite easy for them to do as well. I don't know how you do it in a big organisation, but like, so you know, if it's queuing up messaging, it's queuing up so it sounds like that person. It has the same sign-offs, has the same inflection. So that's sort of the next level it could be. And I guess like you say, it's quite simple in Hook because it's everything's going to focus on the CSM. I guess in a bigger organisation, maybe down the line, you could have segment based on role, right? So you might not want the same agentic workflows and automations linked to it for a CSM versus like a pre-sales engineer, right? So I guess that's an option.
Totally, yeah, and I think, and again, it's that beauty of like having that really clear distinction of like what are the tasks that I need doing. Then it allows you to make decisions on who do I want to do that. So if all the tasks that are left are like commercial and customer discovery, then am I happy for my CSMs to do all of those, or do some of those go to the CSM and some of them go to the account manager or the AE, because that's how we're best set up to apply the skill to that particular role? I think that there's no like easy answer for that. It's very dependent on the organisation and the metrics that you're trying to move, and how easy your platform is, how open your customers are to having value conversations, all of that good stuff.
And a final word on metrics then, as you mentioned it, what impact has this allowed you to have at Hook?
We measure probably two core things. NRR, so huge impact on NRR, because taking away some of the busy work, I feel like that's an awful term, isn't it? But like the busy work that the CSMs would be doing and freeing them up to go do this stuff so that we can coach them to focus there, has a massive impact on your ability to understand the pain that your customers are feeling and figure out how you're going to help them solve that, which for me is the biggest unlock for GRR and NRR. And then efficiency, like we're running bigger books of business. Our customers are running way bigger books of business with existing CSM teams, because they aren't having to spend all of the time doing that groundwork, figuring out what's happening, trying to find out what do I do next. The agents are running that for them.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really interesting discussion or insight into how you're running things at Hook, and I think lots of people will have been scribbling thoughts down there. I certainly was.
Yeah, it's super useful. That was a really interesting, actually, Tash. Thank you. I think it's like right up to the moment as well. Like it's very of the moment, I think, because especially for the audience that listens to this, like I said, of small organisations where they can create these themselves like quite easily. I've done a few agents myself for stuff that I do, and it's not difficult to do, right? You can kind of put these things together and make them very personalised. And I think I definitely would say to any organisation, startups, founders, people listening to this, crack on and give it a shot. It's an easy thing to put in place. But I think the point you made, Tash, is really relevant. Of like, don't just go, let's start building. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think that's a really good shout of like, what does good look like? What does great look like? And don't build stuff until you really establish that. I think that's an important
Yeah.
point. I think people can probably get excited and like, we've got these automations that create an agent that does this and that pulls this information, but it's like, don't just do it to the mistake you said you touched on at some point in your career of like just building before you've established what good looks like, right?
I think it's such a good point on because also the ability to build agents, to your point, Mike, is like at everybody's fingertips now. If you're a small organization and you've got 1 or 2 folks running CS and you've let them go, hey, go do your own thing, go build agents, like they probably need guidance too, because you could go and build anything and everything as a CSM. And the point is like, is that value add? Is that actually helping? Or is it ending up distracting you from what you should be doing with your customers and maybe accidentally costing you a ton of money at the same time? And so, I like really advocate for that. Like figure out what you really, really want to do and then go figure out whether you can automate it or build an agent for it.
And I think you touched on this in a conversation before this recording, which was the cost can get out of control with agents if you aren't clear and defined in what you're actually trying to deliver with them.
Yes, yeah, you've got to be super careful and super savvy that you're monitoring the cost, that you're monitoring what the team are doing, and that it is like additive to the workflow and additive to the customers, rather than just, hey, I can go build anything I want to in Claude Code now, and isn't that really fun? And it's costing me loads of money, and oh, whoops, I forgot about that customer that I need to go meet with.
Cool.
Good. Well, we'll bring it to a close there, I think. But thanks again, and maybe we'll get you back in 6 months' time, and you can, if the podcast has still got an audience, then and we're still going strong, hopefully, and we'll get you back, and you can tell us what's going on in the agent versus automation world.
I would love that. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Tash. Awesome. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Customer Success from the Ground Up podcast with me, Mike Marshall.
And me, Deborah Knight. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't forget to like and follow, and we'll see you on the next one.